Welcome to the March Masterclass presentation. This month, the topic is finding a literary agent. Not an easy process, as we shall see. So, pour yourself a glass of wine or even a stiff shot of vodka and explore the exciting adventure of finding an agent.
There is this incredibly pervasive, this romanticized fantasy about what it actually means to write a book.
Oh, absolutely. The whole cabin in the woods vibe.
Right. You picture yourself like struggling up the side of this massive mountain for months, maybe even years.
Sweating over a keyboard.
Exactly. And then you finally reach the summit, you type the words "the end," you plant your little flag in the snow, and you take this deep breath of victory. You did it.
You think the hard part is over.
But imagine reaching that peak, right, the clouds part, and you look around and realize you aren't at the summit at all. You have just arrived at base camp for an entirely different mountain.
A much scarier mountain.
Oh, yeah. This one is twice as tall, completely covered in slick ice, and there are these heavily armed gatekeepers guarding the path, demanding a toll just to look at your map.
It is a brutal realization for a lot of creative. I mean, it really is. And that is exactly why we are unpacking this specific guide today.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a completely no-nonsense, honestly pretty blunt guide put out by Pavo Real Writers, all about the grueling reality of finding a literary agent.
It does not pull punches.
It really doesn't. So our mission today is to explore this exact transition. Because you, the listener, might be sitting there right now, having just finished a manuscript. You feel incredibly proud. You've planted your flag.
Which is a huge accomplishment, by the way.
Totally. But according to the cold, hard facts of the publishing industry, the hardest part hasn't even begun.
Yeah, the material we are analyzing today strips away basically every ounce of romanticism associated with being an author.
It really does.
It breaks down the harsh business realities of traditional publishing, the mathematical odds of actually getting represented, the intricate psychology of a successful query letter, and this is key, a set of golden rules about reading that every single aspiring writer has to follow.
We are looking purely at the mechanics of an industry that rejects, 99% of what it sees?
Yep, 99%.
And when we say 99% rejection, we mean staring down the barrel of an industry where you are pitching books about trading corn dogs for spaceships, all while jumping through what this guide literally calls a flaming hoop.
A very accurate description.
Right. So before we even get into the tactics of how to find an agent, we have to talk about mindset. We have to completely shatter this cinematic illusion of authorship where you sit in a cozy coffee shop, finish a draft, and a publisher magically hands you a giant check.
It doesn't happen. The reality is that finding an agent requires significantly more effort, time, and emotional resilience than writing the book itself.
Wow.
And you cannot even begin that process until you have a fully written, completely formatted, and entirely edited manuscript.
So no pitching half-baked ideas.
Exactly. If you are an unknown fiction writer, you cannot pitch an idea or a half-finished draft. The product must be complete. But more importantly, you have to fundamentally shift how you view that product.
Okay, how so?
Once you decide to pursue traditional publishing, your manuscript is no longer just your precious art. It is a business proposition.
And this is where it gets really painful for creatives. The guide points out that if you actually do manage to sell your book, you lose ownership of it.
You really do.
The publishers will edit, retitle, and change whatever they feel they need to in order to sell it. I read that and immediately felt this visceral pushback. I mean, you pour your soul into a world, and then a corporate entity comes in and starts moving the furniture around.
It sounds harsh, but you have to look at the underlying economics to understand why they do that.
Because it's a business.
Exactly. Publishing houses operate on incredibly thin margins. They are fronting the money for the author's advance, the developmental editing, the copy editing, the cover design, the printing, the warehouse storage, the distribution, and the marketing.
That is a lot of overhead.
They are taking on 100% of the financial risk. So before a publisher or an agent acting on their behalf will waste a single millisecond on your book, they need a guarantee of financial return. They change the book because they have the data on what the market will actually buy.
The guide is so unapologetically blunt about this. It states that selling a book by a famous person with an established audience is easy.
Of course.
But selling, and I'm quoting this directly because it honestly hurts, thin, poorly written, and unedited tome by a complete unknown is not.
It's a huge wake-up call. The industry is fundamentally risk-averse.
Yeah.
Taking a chance on an unknown entity is a massive financial liability.
And that is why the literary agent is a mandatory gatekeeper.
Yeah.
No reputable traditional publisher is going to look at your book without one.
Right. The agents act as the first line of defense. They filter out the liabilities and find the viable products.
And for the privilege of being that mandatory risk filter, the agent takes a 15% cut of your royalties.
Which is standard.
Right. But I know writers who completely balk at that number. They think, I spent 3 years writing this in isolation, and why do I have to give away a percentage of my own work?
It's a common reaction.
But this guide warns heavily against getting hung up on royalty percentages. It explicitly says, don't make the mistake of thinking you are so special that they will carve out a unique deal just for you.
It really just comes down to basic math. The guide offers this brilliant perspective on this. It says 1% of something is worth far more than 60% of nothing.
Exactly. It is like demanding 100% of an imaginary pizza.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. I mean, I would much rather have 85% of a pizza that actually gets baked and put in a box.
Mhm.
You can sit alone in your room, holding on to 100% of your unread manuscript forever, protecting it from edits and agent fees. Or you can accept the reality of the business and actually get it into the hands of readers.
Because an imaginary pizza doesn't feed anyone.
Exactly.
Once you accept that this is an industry driven by financial return and not sentimentality, you can actually start playing the game.
Okay, so since we've established that the agent is the mandatory gatekeeper to this pizza, the next logical question is understanding the environment you are walking into. What does the search actually look like?
Well, the numbers are daunting.
I looked at the sheer volume of submissions they get, and my first thought was that this is basically a rigged lottery. I mean, the odds of getting a literary agent are cited as anywhere from 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 6,000.
It's incredibly competitive.
Agents are rejecting 95 to 99% of the queries they receive. They get thousands of submissions every single year, but they might only sign 2 to 10 new authors annually. With a 99% rejection rate is querying just a literal lottery where you throw spaghetti at the wall and hope.
It looks like a lottery from the outside, definitely. But the mechanics of the industry prove otherwise. If you treat it like a numbers game, you will fail.
So what's the alternative?
Meticulous research and following exact submission guidelines. That is what transforms this from throwing spaghetti into a highly targeted, strategic campaign. The guide explicitly states that you have to treat finding an agent as a full-time job. It requires professional-level market research.
So how do you actually bypass a risk mitigation filter designed to keep you out?
Yeah.
Because the guide lists a very specific arsenal of tools for this research. It mentions Query Tracker, Agent Query, Manuscript Wish List, and Publisher's Marketplace.
And those aren't just simple directories, they are deep data mining tools.
How so?
Well, take Publisher's Marketplace, for example. It allows you to track an agent's recent deals. You don't just see that they represent science fiction, you see that they just sold a high-concept dystopian sci-fi to a major imprint for 6 figures.
Oh, wow. So you get the exact flavor of what they want.
Exactly. And Manuscript Wishlist is essentially a direct pipeline into an agent's current cravings. Agents use it to broadcast highly specific requests.
Like what?
They might tweet, "I am looking for a middle-grade mystery set in a haunted bakery." If you have that exact book, you aren't a random submission anymore. You are the solution to their immediate problem.
Which makes perfect sense. You aren't just blasting out emails. You are matching supply to a very specific, publicly stated demand. But the guide also mentions a much more analog strategy that I thought was brilliant. Checking the acknowledgments pages of books that are similar to yours.
Oh, that is one of the most effective workarounds for the slush pile.
Really?
Yeah. When you find a recently published, highly successful book that shares the DNA of your manuscript, so similar tone, similar audience, similar pacing, you flip to the back. The author will almost always thank their agent by name.
Because if you write a book about a haunted coffee shop, and you query the agent who just successfully sold the haunted bakery book, you already know they have a proven track record of selling exactly your kind of story.
Exactly. You know, they have the editorial contacts at the publishing houses who buy that specific trope.
So you are basically leveraging their existing professional network.
Precisely. That is how you mathematically improve those 1 in 6,000 odds. You pair that targeted research with a pristine manuscript.
And what if you write nonfiction?
If you are writing nonfiction, you pair it with a strong author platform. Because in nonfiction, you are selling your existing audience as much as you are selling the book itself.
Okay, so you've done the deep dive, you scoured manuscript wish list, you cross-referenced publisher's marketplace, you found the exact agent who wants your book. Now you have to actually make contact.
Here comes the hard part.
Right. And this is where the guide introduces the ultimate weapon in this campaign, the query letter.
If market research is what separates the successful 1% from the rejected 99%, the query letter is the actual vehicle for that strategy.
It's everything.
It is the single most important document an aspiring author will write.
The description of this document in the guide is wild. It calls a query letter part business letter, part creative writing exercise, part introduction, part death-defying leap through a flaming hoop.
It really is a flaming hoop.
They even add a little note assuring you that you won't actually catch fire and die, even though it will feel precisely like that.
That psychological pressure is so real because of the constraints. You have roughly 250 to 300 words to convince a highly skeptical, exhausted professional who has already read 200 emails that day that you are a sound financial investment.
Writing this sounds like crafting the world's most high-stakes dating app profile.
Yes, that's exactly it.
I mean, you have to prove you're deeply fascinating, completely sane, financially viable, and that you've extensively researched their background, all in 3 short paragraphs without sounding crazy.
It's a very fine line to walk.
To show us how it's actually done, the guide deconstructs a successful sample query letter from an author named Nathan Bransford pitching an agent named Mrs. Drayton at Curtis Brown Ltd.
And this letter is an absolute masterclass because it perfectly executes the psychology we've been discussing. It doesn't open with a generic, "Dear agent."
Never do that.
Right. It starts with heavy, targeted personalization.
Yeah, he clearly did his homework. He knows she is a young agent building her list. He mentions admiring a specific project she worked on called Inkwell. But the really clever part is that he knows her tastes. He knows she loved the novel The Book Thief.
And pay attention to the mechanism of how he uses that information. He doesn't just say, "My book is a lot like The Book Thief," which is what most amateurs do.
Right.
He actively demonstrates his own literary voice by paraphrasing Douglas Adams, stating his book is almost but not quite entirely unlike The Book Thief.
It is brilliant because it immediately signals 2 things. It says, I know exactly who you are and what you like, and I am a competent, witty writer.
It sets the tone perfectly.
Then he transitions seamlessly into the actual pitch. His manuscript is a 50,000-word, middle-grade sci-fi novel called Jacob Wunderbar and the Cosmic Space Kapow.
The pitch section is where most writers fail by trying to summarize their entire plot. Bransford doesn't do that at all.
Yeah, he keeps it tight.
He focuses purely on character, inciting incident, and tone.
The details do so much heavy lifting here. He introduces Jacob, who is the bane of substitute teachers everywhere. He brings in his timid best friend Dexter and his chronically overscheduled friend Sarah Daisy.
Great character thumbnails.
And the inciting incident. They trade a corn dog to a mysterious man in silver for a sassy spaceship.
That specific detail, the corn dog, is such a strategic choice.
How so?
Well, he doesn't have to waste word count explaining that this is a goofy, comedic, middle-grade adventure. The presence of a bartered corn dog establishes the tone instantly.
Exactly. Then they blast off, cause a giant space kapow that breaks the universe, and get marooned by a space buccaneer named Mick Kraken on a tiny planet that smells like burp breath.
Burp breath.
Yeah, and right after that he drops this crucial little note. Still fun, but no one dies. Mr. Death would be lonely.
Which loops perfectly back to his opening comparison to The Book Thief, famously narrated by the character of Death.
Oh, that is so smart.
But underneath the burp breath and the sassy spaceships, this letter is basically a Trojan horse for serious business metrics.
Right. He isn't just pitching a wacky story.
He includes extremely specific business elements that signal financial viability.
Yeah, he notes that the book stands alone, but he explicitly highlights its series potential. He even provides potential titles for the sequels, Jacob Wunderbar for President of the Universe, and Jacob Wunderbar and the Vacationing Aliens from Another Planet.
Because an agent isn't looking to make a few $1,000s on a single book. They are looking to build a career that generates recurring revenue over a decade.
So series is gold.
A built-in series with a hooky premise represents long-term financial return. He also casually mentions that he authors an eponymous agenting and writing blog, proving he already has an author platform and understands the industry landscape.
The Pavo Real Guide follows up this deconstruction with some advice that feels incredibly cynical, but is clearly a survival tactic. It points out how Bransford took the time to deeply investigate this target agent. And then it says, as in every job and endeavor in life, sucking up and kowtowing seems to be a requirement for success. Don't scrimp on knee pads.
It is a really provocative way of phrasing it, but the underlying truth is about checking your ego.
Yeah.
When you send a query letter, you are asking a professional to become your business partner and take on the massive task of selling your work. You need to demonstrate that you respect their specific expertise in the market, rather than demanding they recognize your inherent genius.
And nothing screams a lack of professional respect louder than typos. The guide emphasizes the absolute necessity of editing and proofreading your query letters. A single typo can be enough for an agent to hit delete.
Which sounds incredibly harsh.
It sounds so insanely ruthless. If you misspell one word, you lose your shot.
You have to view it from the perspective of inbox fatigue. If an agent has 3,000 submissions to get through, they're not reading to find reasons to say yes. They're reading to find reasons to say no.
Oh, that makes sense.
A typo isn't just a spelling error, it is a signal. It tells the agent that this author lacks attention to detail, which means their 90,000-word manuscript is likely going to require grueling, unpaid developmental and line editing.
It's a huge red flag.
It is a risk indicator. They hit delete because the end consumer, the reader, operates with the exact same level of ruthlessness.
And that is the perfect pivot to the final section of this guide. If you want to understand why agents are ruthless, you have to understand how readers operate. And to understand readers, the guide is uncompromising. You have to be one.
Absolutely.
It says, one source you cannot ignore are books similar to yours. Get a library card. Read similar books, period.
It is a fundamental law of the ecosystem. You simply cannot write for a market you do not consume.
If you refuse to do this, the guide says, don't waste your time writing. You can make more money collecting aluminum cans or begging on a street corner.
They are genuinely not messing around.
No, they are not. But this isn't just about studying sentence structure. It's about understanding the brutal economy of a reader's attention. This is where they introduce librarian Nancy Pearl's 50-page rule.
The 50-page rule is a philosophy of time management for readers, and it is a terrifying reality check for writers.
The core of the rule is simple. Give every book exactly 50 pages to hook you. If you aren't invested by page 50, you have official permission to Chate's DNF, did not finish, and put the book down without a single ounce of guilt. Life is too short to slog through books you aren't enjoying.
It liberates the reader, but it puts immense pressure on the author.
Totally.
It means your pacing, your world building, and your character development have to be razor sharp from the very first sentence. You do not have the luxury of a slow, meandering setup.
And it gets even tighter as you get older. There's an age addendum to this rule. The philosophy is that your time becomes increasingly precious the older you get. So if you are over 50 years old, you subtract your age from 100.
Okay, so the math changes.
Right. That resulting number is your new page limit. A 70-year-old reader only has to give a book 30 pages to prove itself before they toss it.
And the logical extreme of this is the centenarian rule. At age 100, you are officially allowed to judge a book entirely by its cover.
Which is fantastic. But it highlights the sheer competitiveness of the industry. We live in an era of absolute media abundance. Books are competing with infinite scrolling, streaming services, and, well, everything else.
Time is the ultimate currency. If a reader, whose only job is to be entertained, refuses to give a book more than 50 pages because their time is too valuable, you better believe an agent who is reading for a living, often off the clock, won't get a query letter more than 50 seconds.
Wow.
The 50-page rule is the macro-level behavior that drives the micro-level ruthlessness of the literary agent.
So let's bring this deep dive to a close and summarize the incredible crucible we've just outlined. We started with the fantasy of the mountain summit, only to realize that taking a completed manuscript and turning it into a published reality is an entirely different, heavily guarded expedition.
It requires a fundamental shift in mindset. You have to accept the loss of total creative control, willingly hand over a 15% cut of your royalties to an agent for the sake of market access, and treat industry research like a full-time job.
It means combing through acknowledgement pages to find the right partners, surviving a 99% rejection rate, and executing that depth-defying leap through the flaming hoop by crafting a query letter that perfectly balances tone, personalization, and hard business metrics.
And underpinning all of this is the 50-page rule, the sobering reality that you are competing for the most scarce resource on the planet, which is a stranger's attention.
Which leaves us with a fascinating and honestly somewhat unsettling question to mull over. If the traditional publishing ecosystem requires such intense market research, highly formulaic query letters, and immediate fast-paced hooks just to bypass the gatekeepers— wait, let me restart that. If the system demands all of that just to get past the gatekeepers, are we inadvertently training authors to write for agents rather than writing for readers?
It's a great question. And if the system is this rigidly defensive, what does that mean for the future of truly weird, slow burn, groundbreaking literature? The kind of disruptive masterpieces that might legitimately need more than 50 pages to reveal their brilliance.
That is definitely something to chew on the next time you browse the shelves of a bookstore and look at what actually made it through the gauntlet. You have climbed the first mountain by writing the book, but the expedition through the ice and the gatekeepers is a completely different beast. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep reading, keep writing, and we will catch you next time.